I know there's a lot of people worldwide that are very upset with the current governmental system that they see for various reasons. We don't have to get into all the details. I'm certain that people that are especially going down, a spiritual search to get themselves closer to God are definitely seeing end times. And there's some sincere people that are submitting what they believe to be remedies that they're finding on the net. But as a moment in time, someone gave me something that was a little concerning because it seems to be recently drafted. It's from a group called Sovereign Republic of Ontario. It was drafted January 16, 2021. And basically, one of the comments in their first paragraph states something that would be concerning. At least it should be concerning for people on a proper belief of what the scripture says about authority. But we're going to look at it from Caesar's authority, or we'll call it the governments of man. And then we've got, of course, the supremacy of God. And therefore, they start off in their paragraph: sovereignty emanates from man and woman, from no other source, because there is, in fact, no other legitimate source. Man and woman are the only existential authority. Man and woman are sovereign if they choose to be. I'm only reading that far into it because that was enough for me to realize that statement, at least on a spiritual level, from people of God, God's children should know that is completely an inaccurate wording for anybody to take on in their mind as something they're going to believe. The sovereignty, if they're using it in the idea of power and authority, whether legal or spiritual. On the spiritual side, it's God. On the man-made side, it is the powers that God ordained. So for legal, for money, for commerce, the world that we're surrounded with, that is of man, God still places that supreme sovereignty in those legal authorities until his son arrives. But are we supposed to, take on a rebelling situation to this? Well, when we look at the word sovereign, I'm going to read the definition. The root is, of course, in Latin, super, above, over. Now, that term is very close to the wording. When I see that word sovereign, it's not a word used in the Bible. God's supremacy is not referred to in the sense using that word. There are some modern translations that translate that sovereign, but God is supreme. But when we're talking about legal authorities, it seems to be more in that context with the definition, because they don't even mention God in the dictionary. They don't mention divinity there. So I'm going to take it down that this is probably more of a term that came from the legal world, the civil world of Caesar. And so when we go down that, it says above or superior to all others, chief, greatest, supreme, supreme in power, rank, or authority, of or holding the position of ruler, royal, reigning. Now, in the sense, if we were taking that on a spiritual level, certainly God would be sovereign. He's at the top. But in the world of the legal, God, according to Romans 13, which we're going to go to, states in Romans 13, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. So we notice that all power comes from God. So if he has appointed the higher powers and ordained them, then that power they have for the legal system, for temporary until his son's kingdom arrives, is basically in a supreme position in the legal sense, in the monetary sense, in the way the whole public society is governed for the moment. It says, Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnations. Okay? Now, you can read further on those verses, but for the moment here, this group has called themselves a sovereignty. Okay? I'm just saying right now, for you to start making one up on someone else's territory right now, especially when you're using terms like Ontario or Canada, that's almost like declaring war on them, because those are their coined words. Therefore, I certainly wouldn't have been, at least on that end, if I was even going to think of going down that direction, I would not have been using the term Ontario. But they have, and in it, they're talking about bearing arms. They're talking about, things that are definitely looking like they could be a threat to another, to the nation itself that's on this soil, because they're saying that they're not going to, literally be deprived of any of that. God's people do not have the right to claim arms privately. I know that may seem really, really bothersome, but if your purpose is to defend God with a gun, your position is God. That's not, because you won't see any pattern of that anywhere in the Bible, as far as the New Testament or the New Covenant scriptures dealing with Christ's message as the Prince of Peace. So we're in God's hands, and I'm just telling you that if you're thinking of bearing arms against the state and its people, or anybody that's involved in that, you're taking the wrong direction, because that is certainly not what Christ left you as an inheritance. He left you peace, and you can remove that peace from its clash in the public, which we've been talking about. But to actually take up private arms, which your private side is peaceful, it's your God-given name, and to take arms on that would be against, especially if we're understanding that it's really your God-given name, your Christian name, Christ being the Prince of Peace. That supremacy does not go after with weapons the Caesar side of the state. So many of the things were written in here looks like they're putting targets on their head, and it's certainly not something down a spiritual direction, though it may pull in, as many of these schemes do. They're trying to pull in something that looks like they touch what they seem to be near a spiritual or a God side here and there, using terms like unalienable. Yes, your given name is unalienable, but the state name, the last name, the public name, the Caesar's name, that is alienable. That's why it's a debt. And so therefore, unless you're believing that you have the debt, then continue being a surety for it. But in this situation, unfortunately, they may not want to hear this, but this is definitely not accurate, at least on a spiritual side and on a biblical side.